Hi, everybody. My name is Leah Callum-Butler. I'm the director of Emphasis, and you are in for a treat. This is going to be a fascinating conversation. Now, look, not too long ago, I think people were still trying to get their head around the idea of AI agents. But today, it's not difficult to imagine a reality where agents, not humans, drive the majority of economic activity. And the constraint is no longer compute or connectivity. The constraint is us. It's human latency. So what happens when machines transact, decide, and coordinate faster than humans can even comprehend? That's what we're going to chat about today. So, guys, in our prep call, I got the sense that you feel that people might not actually understand how fast this is actually coming on, that the agentic economy is already here. This is not a sci-fi future concept. So can you paint me a picture? Where do you think we're at right now versus where other people think we might be? Just a lay of the land, I guess, to get us started.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that we're at the end of inning one right now, but it is inning one in an exponential trend. Maybe just some quick data that could be insightful here.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so I was looking at some stats from like McKinsey and Gartner and things like that. It seems like about 25% of enterprises right now have barely really touched anything on AI besides maybe a ChatGPT login. You have about another 65% that have been exploring but not really quite fully utilizing, or maybe they're in different phases of starting to get it so that there's more agentic work going on inside, and about 10% that have actually fully autonomized some functions. But the reality from people that work in this space, that anybody that's close enough will tell you, is that even that 10% is overwhelmingly represented by much smaller, faster-moving types of companies, other than like the major hyperscalers. And the big blocker has largely been around security and governance and how do you actually make these things work safely, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's happening quickly, but there's still a very long way to go.
Zev, do you think people are underestimating how fast this transition is happening?
Yeah, it's been very cool to see the evolution, especially on the retail side, and you're seeing new agentic marketplaces pop up. You're seeing real economic activity, but especially when you think about commerce, which we'll talk about quite a bit, institutions are very early, and it is really that governance and policy and settlement layer that we are solving, and it's the missing trust piece that AI needs for commerce. So institutions are early, but our companies, our clients, they are 100% crypto related. Many of them are AI related. Many of them now are AI companies doing crypto things. And so we're seeing our clients asking us for AI workflows, and we announced our agentic banking offering earlier this week at Consensus on the main stage, which we're excited about.
Just a follow-up question to that. Do you think we're seeing just a faster economy here or an entirely new economy? You touched on that a little bit, but can you elaborate?
It's definitely faster, and I'll actually highlight a stat I heard yesterday on the stage here about the speed and velocity of machine transactions. And I think it's important to understand the scale of machine transactions and even payments, which we'll get into. But Cloudflare processes more transactions every second than the Swift network processes in 24 hours. And so what are those transactions? They're bot transactions, they're agent transactions. And so as you think about this new economy, you need to think about transactions at a scale that we just haven't even seen in payments up until now. And this is why you're able to have things like micro transactions. You can buy something for an eighth of a penny agentically today, right? So you're not seeing the large dollar value transactions. Nobody is sending a $100 million wire agentically yet. But institutions and those moving institutional capital need regulated rails. They can't move institutional capital on lightly regulated rails, and that was the missing piece that we came in to solve.
Does that mean we're going to see new kinds of business models? When microtransactions actually make sense, when machine-to-machine transactions can happen instantly, autonomously, are we going to see entirely new business models emerge?
Oh, 100%. And we are actually already starting to see quite a bit of that. And so if you look at the way that humans have been sold to for basically all of human history, but particularly in the last 100 years, it's very emotionally driven, it's very visual. Those things completely disappear as you go into an agentic economy where you have what's called a headless interface, right? Where there really is no visual representation. It's purely about the information you can provide and the access that you can provide. And so, the entire way that commerce gets done is about to change materially because the agent doesn't have the emotion that humans do, and will make decisions based on a lot more rational programming than humans would have historically.
It might help if we use a case study to explain and understand some of these things. Greg, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about BitTensor. Maybe you could explain it in simple terms, but also when you started seeing the agents within this system competing and coordinating autonomously, what actually surprised you about it?
Yeah, so for those that aren't aware, BitTensor is a permissionless network for the development of AI infrastructure. It enables open competition, and the network acts as a permissionless coordination and incentive mechanism. And so, what we're seeing on there is, not only the development of AI models, but actually agents that are working to facilitate the actual development. And what I mean by that is, there are subnets, which are what these competitions are for the development. There are some of those that are operated by agents. There are the mining on it, which is creating advancements in the models themselves, is being done by agents, right? And so what we're seeing now, because it's an open permissionless network, is an increasingly agentic development of AI itself, and the speed that creates is absolutely unparalleled, right? You have the ability for these things to be on 24/7, competing, mining the network, that are producing now state-of-the-art models across a wide range of economic domains, from science to real estate to trading, and all happening on a perpetual basis by these agents that know how to not only act but self-improve.
So is there still any aspect of human intervention, and if so, where is it?
There is. Right now, almost exclusively, all the money and activity ultimately ties back to a human somewhere, but the work is very much being outsourced to the agent workforce.
Right. And what sort of intelligence are you seeing emerge the fastest?
What was that?
What sort of intelligence are you seeing come out of it, the fastest?
Oh my gosh, yeah. So one of the subnets now has a state-of-the-art model for real estate price forecasting. So if you're going to sell your home and you wanted a highly accurate way to assess what the value of that home is going to be,
oh, wow.
They've trained the most advanced publicly available model. If you wanted to, there's one that is leading in drug discovery, so searching for candidate molecules to bind with certain proteins that can be used for chemotherapy. And we saw one last month that it was able to outperform the industry benchmark for search capabilities. It goes through, there's 120 some odd of them right now. I could spend the rest of the time talking about them, but people are picking off different domains and basically have realized if you create an open, permissionless infrastructure for people to come compete on these improvements, then agents can be applied to them, and the speed of iteration is just incredible. And the last thing I'll say on that is, you have these frontier companies, Anthropic and OpenAI and the like, and they'll ship a few models a year, maybe one or two major updates. In BitTensor, you're seeing real-time updates that are happening every day, every week. These models are improving, basically in real time, as these competitions create more and more iterations.
And just one last question on that.
Yep.
How do they transact?
So the BitTensor network is oriented around the native currency is called Tau. Each subnet has its own token, and you're seeing agents that interact directly with each other through the crypto rails that are native to the network. And some of them have leveraged X402, which is a broader industry standard for interacting with other outside websites and the like.
Thank you. So before we get deep into it, because I know we're going to talk a lot about some of the bottlenecks that are actually preventing these AI agents from really proliferating, but Zev, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your announcement this week. So you're doing digital banking for AI agents, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about the announcement, because I think these payment rails, in order to allow them to transact, is really, really critical.
Absolutely. So we announced our agentic banking offering for institutions. Our clients, again, are crypto-related, they're AI-related, they're really at the frontier of technology. They're now working with agentic commerce, but they need ways to settle. And so for us, it's really three-pronged. It's a policy layer, a governance layer, and a settlement layer, right? And so institutions can't have autonomous agents hallucinating with business credit cards, for example, right? You can't have an autonomous agent try to send a $100 million wire transfer. That doesn't work. There's something called compliance requirements for banks, right? You need to know that if you're interacting with a merchant, how do you know that's not a sanctioned merchant, right?
Yeah.
And again, you can go up in terms of verification, Is it bank onboarded? Does it pass your risk review team, right? How do you treat these counterparties in this new agentic economy? That's really important. But I would argue without the settlement piece, you can't have an agentic economy. And merchants and vendors get to decide how they want to be paid. And you might think that most of this activity is all crypto, and that was my natural instinct as well. But a lot of the clients that we've spoken with and work with want to just receive card payments. Credit cards work, they get agentic tokens, and that's at least a medium of exchange that's accepted by merchants around the world today. But it needs to be multi-rail, it needs to be rail agnostic. If an agent wants to receive a card payment, they want to receive stablecoins, other cryptocurrencies, a Fedwire, ACH, we abstract that from our clients and we manage the settlement behind the scenes. And so we're bringing settlements to the agentic economy, and we're doing it in a way where your legal team, your risk team, your board will allow your institution to actually integrate with the new economy. The announcements that we've seen from other companies have been great. There are some really exciting marketplaces, again, that are developing mostly on the retail side, but we're very early on the institutional side, and it's because we haven't had the regulated rails to help power that settlement.
Just to add to that, you mentioned actually something in our prep call, which I thought was a great data point, because there was a recent CoinDesk article talking about the fact that the X402 protocol is really still in trial phase, because actually it's not doing as much volume as some people might think. It was averaging around $28,000 in daily transaction volume. And as you say, most agents are still paying with cards. So we are quite early on the stage, I guess.
I would agree with that. One thing we did see from X402 though early on was what it would look like when it starts to scale. So the post-launch, when there was a lot of excitement around it, it has definitely slowed down relative to its peak. But within a few weeks of launch, we saw 14 million transactions happening over X402 on a weekly basis, right? And so what that shows you is the speed at which agents are capable of transacting. It's to the point that Zeb was just describing. Enterprises are going to take a while before they're really moving a lot of money around through this stuff, but we've gotten a preview into what it's going to look like in a very short amount of time from the early days of X402.
So I'm seeing a little bit of a tension here, actually, between open source permissionless systems using crypto as the rails, but then also we're seeing institutions come in. So do you think these two kinds of systems can actually coexist, with institutional accountability requirements, but also those that are actually open and permissionless? Are those two fundamentally incompatible models?
Absolutely. And I think just the fact that, look at the state of consensus right now relative to where we were 10 years ago as an industry, right?
It's incomparable, yeah.
And it's gonna look very similar. Would be my assessment there. Is that the things that Anchorage are doing are absolutely critical to be able to onboard enterprises into this space. Having built a lot of this stuff myself and working with a lot of other companies in the space that have to manage everyone's trying to create the wheel at the same time right now in terms of how you manage the security and the governance on these agentic workflows. The more of that can be abstracted and produced by people that have the high levels of trust like Anchorage, the easier it's going to be for that adoption to come on the institutional side. At the same time, you're going to have the absolute frontier is necessarily going to be in a permissionless environment where you don't have to go through procurement and you don't have to go through contracts, and you can just let the agents run loose and move at the maximum level of speed that they can without the permissions that humans have put around everything. So the two will coexist for sure. And I can tell you the stuff that we see on BitTensor, well, it's a permissionless network to access. The outputs of it are being commercialized and sold into enterprises today. Right, so the companies that are setting up these competitions, develop these models, they go and commercialize them through lots of other means. So that tie is already there in a big way.
All right, question that I think is going to apply to both of you, but I think you'll have very different answers. So you both talked about the challenges with onboarding, whether it's humans or even agents. And Zev, obviously you're solving for some of the compliance challenges. So can you KYC a non-human entity? If so, how? And how is it different if we're looking at an institutional setting versus open and permissionless?
Sure, so there's a term that has emerged, KYA, know your agent, right? And so for us, we think about this in different ways. There's the merchant and vendor side. Who are you interacting with? Who are you paying? What do you need to know about them? There's also know your client, know your business, right, from a bank and regulatory perspective. And so we onboard our institutional clients, and they have the ability to create agents on our platform, and we're framework agnostic, and so they can plug in the reasoning of their choice into that model. So for us, we know who is operating the agent. We cannot have a compliance infraction with an agent and just blame an agent that we sent a transaction to a malicious actor or to an entity on a sanctions list. That doesn't work in banking. We are America's first federally regulated crypto bank, and so we cater to the institutional community. But look, for retail flows, you might not need the same level of verification. For micro-cent transactions, we talked about obviously the $28,000 a day in 402 protocol. Remember, that's micro-cent, right? And so there actually is a large amount of volume. But again, we're really thinking about the institutional side and what do we need to build to enable hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to flow agentically. We send wires for, again, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So those are not the clients that are going to really facilitate some of the micro-cent transactions. It depends on use case. We're very excited about the pay per usage, the pay per crawl type of model. It's very innovative. I think it's going to lead to better, more transparent pricing across the board. But again, pairing institutional capital with regulated agentic rails is where we're playing.
To add the other perspective on that one, well, I agree with everything you said in that context. Part of what we see on the BitTensor network is that the value of it being a completely open and permissionless room for people to compete on training these models. And so what's nice about it is the miners that are competing to improve the AI infra, they only get paid when they're the best performers, right? So that you get paid much like in Bitcoin mining, where you get paid for the correct hash. In this case, you get paid for the most successful improvements against benchmarks on the AI. And what's amazing about it being a permissionless network and an open competition is that people are coming in and competing at all different times, right? And so the top models are paying right now up to $60,000 per day to people that are improving these things. And that could be somebody that's a professor at Berkeley, or it could be somebody in their basement at Romania. And that changes literally every day, by whoever's performing the most. That doesn't necessarily lend itself to all the onboarding processes you would need to have that make more sense for institutions. And it lends itself much more to the more crypto native type of space where you want to move at absolute maximum speed, because that's the only way that there's going to be a world where an open network could possibly compete with these hundreds of billions of dollar market cap companies that are now at the frontier.
Okay, so we talked about KYC, which is obviously an important part of compliance, but where are some of the other regulatory issues you foresee that we're going to have to focus on within the next few years? Whether it's new policy frameworks, regulatory clarity, what do you think are the big glaring issues?
I think if we stick on the payments conversation for a minute here, how do you handle chargebacks in an agentic commerce situation?
You could even game the system, right? You
Exactly.
You could program your agent
fault?
to just charge back everything.
We already have malicious bots trying to defraud other agents. What does a micro transaction mean from even like a payment perspective on an interchange and a card swipe? So these are things that we have early ideas, and I know even some of the card networks are figuring this out. But it's not going to look exactly like the ACH network, right, or Fedwire. There are going to need to be some new rules in the agentic economy. Look, maybe one wild idea is don't allow chargebacks for certain low-value transactions, and you solve it that way. Obviously, that could lead to lawsuits and other regulations, and it's obviously not as simple as it seems. But I think that's something that we're really spending a lot of time on the payment side of things and on settlements. From a broader regulatory perspective, again, we do employ our existing bank framework to the agentic business, and so we're not cutting corners. We're not doing new things on the compliance side there from a client perspective and a customer perspective. And again, focusing on the institutional side for us is something that we've already been doing, right? We've been innovating for the last 7 years. We invented crypto banking. We're inventing agentic banking. And so for us, in some ways, it doesn't feel that different from a regulatory perspective. But the practicality of the payments, and again, going back to what does a chargeback mean, is a very interesting conversation.
One other piece on that is, as more and more moves to agentic workflows, these things start to do. The value of them is that they're able to think on their own and produce ideas and execute on their own. And it starts to blend into a serious question about where does liability exist as these things are executing. We saw an interesting example of that with the Tornado Cash events over the last 4 or 5 years. You may recall the developers of Tornado Cash. For those of you who aren't aware, Tornado Cash was a mixer. It was an on-chain mixer. The developers deployed it. They didn't control it anymore, and it existed as a smart contract that would effectively obfuscate the payments going in and out, so that you could kind of hide where your money was if it came off of something that was more trackable, right? And so, the feds went after it, did their best to shut it down. They went after the developers, and the developers, just in the last probably 12, 18 months, were effectively, it was ruled that they weren't controlling it. They wrote code, effectively code as speech, and they deployed it, and it was just kind of doing its thing, but they weren't actually operating it. And so, there was at least a very interesting precedent set there, and what I don't think anybody really saw at the time, just because we weren't quite there technically, is there's a world where the risk that's associated with that, or I should say, or the productivity that's associated with it, is 1,000x what we saw with Tornado Cash, right? Things can be deployed, you can put them onto public networks that can run agentically, and who's responsible for it? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm just, you asked what we're going to be thinking about. I think that's going to be a big one.
Yeah, okay. That'll keep me awake at night. We were just talking about something behind backstage, which I thought was really interesting. So a lot of people are worried about AI replacing jobs, right? Which might actually be quite a reductionist way to think about the future of the agentic economy. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on what do you think the economy looks like in the future once it's taken all the jobs?
Sure. Maybe I'll give a personal note. A year ago, when I really started to get more involved with AI and all the models that everybody uses and ChatGPT, I thought this was going to be a time saver. We were going to get time back. Everything was going to be more efficient, and maybe we can enjoy the work-life balance.
We'd be drinking cocktails on the beach.
Exactly, exactly. But in reality, I'm working twice as much, right? I mean, the agentic economy is so fascinating. You have an idea. Your agent can write a full business plan in a minute, and then you can build a website for you, and you can effectively build businesses in minutes. I mean, it's a pretty incredible space. And so I think it's really about how do you use AI efficiently, and especially as you think about multi-tenant and, let's bring it back to the company example, different employees and departments all using the same AI and interacting, what does that look like? I feel like individually, AI has made people more efficient by a factor of 5x, by a factor of 10x. Companies haven't really gotten that 5x, 10x factor, right? Because again, everyone in many companies are using AI for their own use, right? They're not sharing information, they're not benefiting the larger company, they're not, you come up with a new workflow that saves you, hours a day, I don't really benefit from that, right? And so I think a lot of companies are figuring out how do we actually embed agents in ways that everybody can advance together, and then I'm excited that we can potentially get to that 5x, 10x efficiency and productivity at an institutional level.
I would mirror that, and I have a couple other data points there. So I was looking at data from the company Ramp, which is a financial services company that has tens of thousands, if not more, small and medium-sized businesses on it from across the US and I think internationally now. And they were tracking the revenue growth of the companies on their platform from the launch of ChatGPT up to the end of 2025. And what they found was that the top quartile of AI spenders had, as a unit, as a cohort, had north of 100% growth over that period, whereas the non-spenders were 20% growth over that period, and it was actually close to 15% in the first year, and then basically leveling off. So what you see there is that the people that are actually spending the most on AI are growing their businesses, and that still today and for the foreseeable future is going to require additional human capital to help facilitate all the additional business. And those are not all tech companies. Some of those, one of them was like one of the anecdotes they showed was like a window company that installs windows, and they just had better customer acquisition through use of AI. Wow. And so they obviously need a lot more people to go install windows as you get more business. So as we see these things happening, and that's reflected in data that we see today. Like if you look at software engineering jobs, the amount of open roles for software engineers has continued to ramp up over the last 18 months.
Which probably goes against what people would think. They might have thought that engineers were the first to be replaced.
Oh, totally. Well, yeah. They've just been 10x, 100x. But what you find is that it's unlocking opportunity, and it allows you to grow your business. And in doing so, that comes with additional human necessity as well.
Amazing. Those are big numbers in a very short period of time. We're running out of time. A thought to leave us on, right at the beginning of this talk, we were sort of saying that some people might not be aware of how fast this is moving, how quickly transition is coming on. If we look at the next, let's just say 12 months, because 24 months might actually be a really, really long time in agent-to-agent commerce, what do you think people should be focusing on, or opportunities they could be looking out for, challenges that they need to be aware of that they might be missing now?
Yeah, I think if you think about the number of agents, there are more humans on Earth than agents today. Maybe that will flip in a few years, 3 years, 5 years. I don't think that's going to happen imminently, but I'm almost positive that before the end of this year, agents will make the majority of the economic decisions in the world, right? And so if you think about that scale, right, that is how quickly this is moving. That'll happen again in months, right? A number of months. Again, 5 years for number of agents, but economic decisions are happening every day. They're happening at scale. It's growing very quickly. Institutions are coming in, right? I mean, we thought institutions were early to crypto. I mean, institutions are pretty early to the agentic commerce world. And that's very exciting to see. It's exciting to see institutions at the forefront, really exploring in many of the same ways as retail, but doing it with a regulated platform.
How big is that appetite right now? Are they clamoring to get into agentic commerce, or do you think there's still a little bit of hesitation?
I have not been able to go through all the emails I received after our agentic announcement earlier this week. Hundreds of inbounds, and so maybe I'll follow up with some more specific data. But no, look, we've got clients in production. We have partners we announced with Google earlier this week. Companies want to experiment. They want to explore. They want to buy things agentically. They just don't know how to do it.
Yep.
They don't know what rails. Obviously, you can't give an agent a business credit card with a $100,000 monthly limit and hope it doesn't hallucinate. That doesn't work, right? And so the governance layer is important. Is it a predefined limit? Is it a per transaction approval? Right? These are the things that we've built that ensures that your agents are acting appropriately, right? And that means a different thing to different people. But again, you can't go rogue in the banking world, right? And so we think about predefined controls, governance, settlements, policy controls, and that comes together in this institutional offering.
Just a quick final supplement on that. If the things we've been talking about are on stage today are foreign to any of you, you need to fix that immediately. This is my personal advice to you. You're a voice broker in 2005 that's about to get run over by HFT, and it's unavoidable. So as a closing thought, I'd highly encourage you all to go figure out how you can start incorporating this into your lives, because your competitors are, and everyone behind you is going to be doing it as well.
And maybe I would just say, build an agent. You do it personally, it changes your worldview on agentic activity. I highly recommend it.
Don't say you weren't warned. This has been a great chat, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Leo.
Thank you.